The chipped paint flaked onto Mark's sneakers as he leaned against the railing. Salt stung his lips, sharp and insistent. "Race you to the buffet." His younger sister, Lily, tugged his sleeve, eyes bright. Mark grinned. "You're on, pest." They wove through sunburnt tourists, laughter echoing off the polished decks. Dad waved from a lounge chair, Mom sipping lemonade beside him. Everything felt perfect, warm, lazy, endless. A sharp sound cut the air near the pineapple platter. Mark glanced over. A man in a rumpled linen shirt hacked quickly into his elbow. "Sea air," he muttered to the woman beside him, wiping his brow. She nodded absently, reaching past him for tongs, her hand brushing his. Mark paused. The man's knuckles were bone-white on the spoon handle, trembling faintly. Then Lily shoved him. "Slowpoke." The moment dissolved in her teasing. Later, Mark lay on his narrow cabin bed, replaying it. The tremor in that man's hand. The damp sheen on his temples under the bright lights. Outside, waves slapped the hull, a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that usually lulled him. Tonight, it felt like a countdown. He tossed, sheets tangling. Just allergies, he told himself. Ships recycled air. Dry throats happened, but the memory stuck, a splinter beneath vacation's smooth skin. Morning brought a different sound. Thin, wet, rhythmic. It drifted from the corridor, not laughter now, but a ragged, muffled coughing behind cabin doors, one after another. Mark pressed his ear to the cool metal. Down the hall, a steward cursed softly, his cart rattling to a stop. Fear coiled in Mark's stomach, cold and sudden. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He slipped out quietly, telling his parents he was fetching juice. The infirmary wasn't far. He found its door wedged open with a stained towel. Inside was chaos held under glass, bodies packed onto cots and slumped against walls, slick with sweat under the glaring fluorescent lights. Yet it was silent. No groans, no pleas, just that thick, awful wheezing, a chorus of drowning breaths trapped inside a metal box. Mark froze in the doorway, the smell of antiseptic and sour sickness hitting him like a wall. Through the half-open door of a treatment room, Mark saw him, the linen-shirted man from the buffet. He lay rigid on a gurney, skin bleached paper white, cracked like sun-baked mud under the sterile light. His chest barely lifted. The ship's doctor leaned close, adjusting an oxygen mask. Mark watched the doctor's gloved fingers fumble with the strap. They trembled violently, slick with condensation inside the latex. The tremor wasn't fatigue, it was terror, raw and undisguised. The doctor glanced up, locking eyes with Mark through the gap. His gaze was hollow, haunted. He looked away quickly, pressing the mask harder, as if sealing in the silence. Mark stumbled backward, bile rising in his throat. The sterile hallway air felt suddenly thick, dangerous. He turned to run, his sneakers squeaking on the linoleum, the sound echoing sharply in the suffocating quiet. Each breath he drew felt contaminated, sharp with the metallic tang of panic and the unseen horror blooming unseen around him. He had to get back. He had to warn them. They weren't safe. None of them were safe, not anymore. Above him, hidden speakers hissed with static. A tinny, strained voice boomed out, unnaturally loud against the wheezing backdrop. Attention valued guests. Minor respiratory irritations affecting some passengers are responding well to treatment. Please remain calm and confine yourselves to cabins. Recreational facilities are temporarily closed. Avoid unnecessary contact. We apologize for the inconvenience. The captain's voice broke slightly on the word inconvenience. Almost instantly, a low, guttural hacking echoed through the vents overhead, wet and ragged, drowning out the empty reassurance. The sound crawled down the ductwork, seeping into every corridor, every cabin. It wasn't one cough. It was dozens, layered, a monstrous wet rasp that vibrated the very walls. Mark sprinted down the corridor, the slick soles of his shoes sliding on the polished floor. The hacking in the vents seemed to follow him, growing louder near intersections, a ghastly counterpoint to his pounding heart. He passed a cabin door cracked open. Inside, a woman lay on the floor, face pressed against the cool metal, her chest convulsing violently as she gasped against the carpet. Her eyes rolled towards Mark, wide and terrified, silently pleading beyond her drowning breaths. He slammed the door shut without thinking, the heavy thud resonating in his bones. The smell lingered, sweet decay mixed with sweat and desperation. He burst into his own cabin, gasping, locking the door behind him. His parents jumped, startled. Lily whimpered from her bunk. "Mark, what's happening?" Mom asked, her voice tight with fear she was trying to mask. Dad stood protectively near Lily, face pale. Before Mark could choke out a word, a heavy thump */ hit the corridor wall outside their door, followed by a weak, choking cry and the awful sound of fingernails scraping weakly down the painted metal. Then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The intercom's lie still echoed somewhere in the distance, but the truth was right outside their thin cabin door, breathing its last. The nightmare wasn't coming. It was already here, clawing at the walls. Mark fought to steady his breath. He told them, the words stumbling out thick and fast, the packed infirmary, the silence worse than screams, the doctor's trembling terror, the man already turned into a corpse under harsh light. He described the corridor's horrors, the choking woman, the captain's fractured reassurance drowned by the wet hacking pouring from the vents. Dad slumped onto Lily's bunk, cradling her shaking form. Mom pressed her knuckles to her mouth, eyes wide. "It's everywhere," Mark finished, his voice raw. "Faster than they are saying. Way faster." Despair hung thick in the stale cabin air, smelling faintly of disinfectant spray and rising panic. Later, desperate for air or answers, Mark slipped out alone, navigating dimmed emergency lights and avoiding corridors echoing with muffled coughs. He found a forgotten maintenance hatch behind a bulky laundry cart near the stern. Inside, a narrow service tunnel snaked downward, lit by flickering bulbs. Dank air, thick with grease and stale seawater, replaced the ship's recycled stench. Heart hammering against his ribs, he crept deeper. Below, muffled voices drifted tense, urgent. Hiding behind a dripping pipe junction, Mark froze. 3 crewmen, their uniforms clean but faces strained, huddled around a flickering flashlight beam illuminating an escape route schematic. "Before sunrise," hissed one, pointing at a lower deck access point. "Lifeboats are compromised. People see you lowering one, they swarm. Use the tender launch bays instead. Midships starboard." Another muttered, "Fuel's low, but it's our shot. Leave the sick. Leave everyone." Mark pressed himself against the cold metal wall while rising again. They weren't planning a rescue, they were plotting an escape, for themselves. Alone. He backed away silently, sweat chilling on his skin. The crew's betrayal was a deeper chill than the infected corridors. Dawn wasn't salvation, it was a deadline. He had to get back. They couldn't stay, not trapped, not waiting. Lily, Mom, Dad. He pictured the doctor's hollow eyes, leave everyone. The thought clawed at him. How? The tender bays, midship starboard. The whispered location echoed in his skull like a lifeline poisoned by treachery. His family needed him now. He turned, running back through the dripping tunnel, the crew's whispers morphing into the phantom wet coughs that seemed to chase him through the ship's steel guts. They had hours, maybe less. He burst into their cabin, gasping, slamming the hatch shut behind him. 3 fearful faces snapped towards him. "We have to go," Mark rasped, voice thick with urgency. "Right now." He didn't wait for questions, grabbing Lily's hand, pulling her off the bunk. "Forget everything." His eyes locked onto Dad's. The crew, they're abandoning ship at dawn, through the tender bays, starboard side, they're leaving everyone behind. Dad's face paled further, understanding dawning instantly. Mom choked back a sob, but the captain said, "No time." Mark cut her off, already pulling Lily towards the door. "They lied. The infirmary's gone. People are dying everywhere. Those bays are our only way off. Now." The corridor was a gauntlet. Silence hung thicker than before, punctuated by sharp, wet bursts of coughing behind closed doors. They moved quickly, silently, Mark leading, Dad herding Lily and Mom close behind. Every shadowed corner felt like a trap. A sudden crash echoed ahead, metal on metal. They froze against the wall. Peering around a bulkhead, Mark saw it. A crew member, face masked, wrestling frantically with another man clawing at his uniform near the access hatch Mark had found. The passenger coughed violently, spraying flecks visible in the dim emergency light, desperation twisting his face. The crewman shoved him hard into the wall, a sickening thud echoing, then sprinted down the corridor, abandoning the hatch. Mark waited agonizing seconds until the slumped figure went still. "Go," he hissed. They scrambled over the crumpled form, Mark yanking open the heavy hatch. Dank, greasy air washed over them. The service tunnel plunged downwards into flickering gloom. "Down here," Mark urged, pushing Lily through first. Mom followed quickly, Dad shoving their small backpack through before turning to shut the hatch. As he swung it closed, a frantic pounding erupted against the other side, weak, desperate fists hammering the metal. Dad hesitated, a flash of anguish crossing his face. The pounding grew frantic, mingled with a wet, gurgling sob. Mark grabbed Dad's arm. "We can't." Dad flinched, then slammed the hatch shut, the heavy clang echoing like a tomb seal. He threw the rusty locking bolt. The muffled sobs faded quickly, replaced only by their own ragged breathing and the dripping water deeper in the tunnel. Below, faint shouts and hurried footsteps echoed upwards, the crew beating their own retreat. Their race was on. The tunnel was a tight, rust-stained throat. Mark led the way, the beam of Dad's small emergency flashlight bouncing wildly over dripping pipes and slick metal grates. Lily clung to Mom's hand, her small whimpers swallowed by the oppressive gloom. The shouts from below grew louder, sharper. They rounded a corner and froze. Ahead, a jammed service elevator car sat askew, its doors pried half open. Inside, flashlight beams danced wildly. Mark pressed against a cold bulkhead, signaling his family back into shadow. Through the narrow gap, he saw frantic movement. Crewmen bundled hastily into a small, open tender lifeboat suspended just outside the elevator shaft. Canvas bags were tossed in, clattering. Two men scrambled over the gunwale. "That's it, go, go," someone hissed. The boat rocked violently as its motor coughed to life. 3 spaces gaped emptily on the stern bench, illuminated briefly by the elevator's interior light before shadows swallowed them. Darkness slammed down as the elevator lights cut out. The tender boat's engine roared louder, fading as it descended rapidly into the ship's belly. Mark blinked against the sudden blackness, the image of those vacant seats burning in his vision. A tremor traveled through his arm, not his own. Dad's hand found Mark's shoulder in the suffocating dark, fingers digging in not comfort but shared horror, shared understanding. The crew were gone. Those empty spaces screamed of choices made, lives abandoned. The faint vibration through the deck plates shifted, the tender had launched. Silence rushed back in, thick with the smell of oil and damp metal. Above them, through vents, the coughing chorus seemed louder, deeper, clawing its way down. Their escape route was clear but hollow. Mark swallowed hard. "The bays are below," he whispered, his voice cracking. "They left it open." Dad squeezed his shoulder once hard before pulling away. "Move," Dad breathed, the word sharp with dread, "before they find it." They scrambled downward through the dripping gloom. The tender bay was cavernous, its high ceiling lost in shadow. Cold, salt-tinged air bit their faces, a relief after the tunnel's stale grease. Moonlight struggled through grimy portholes, illuminating the oily water sloshing 20 feet below. And there it was, the last tender, bobbing gently against the dock, tethered by thick ropes. It was small, open-topped, painted a chipped, peeling orange. 4 oars lay neatly inside. Hope surged through Mark, fierce and wild. "There," Lily hissed, pointing. They sprinted, their footsteps echoing off the vast metal walls. Dad reached the dock edge first, grabbing the rope ladder dangling down the ship's side towards the waiting boat. He turned, his face stark in the dim light. Mark saw it then, the unnatural flush high on his father's cheekbones, the slight tremor in the hand gripping the rope, the sheen of sweat on his brow not from exertion. He hadn't coughed, not once. But Mark remembered the desperate, wet struggle near the hatch, the spray in the dim light as the passenger fought the crewman. Dad had shoved him aside. Dad fixed them with a look that carved itself into Mark's soul, fierce love mixed with bone-deep resignation. "Get in the boat," he commanded, his voice unnaturally steady, rough at the edges. Mark opened his mouth, a protest rising. Dad shook his head sharply. "Now, Mark, Lily, Sarah." He used Mom's name with deliberate calm. Mom froze, her eyes widening as she saw what Mark saw. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Thomas, no." Dad didn't flinch. "The coughing started an hour ago," he said simply, quietly. "Deep." He let go of the rope ladder and stepped back onto the dock between his family and the cavernous bay entrance. "I can't come, I won't." His eyes met Mark's, holding him. "Get them away, fast." Below, the water slapped hungrily against the hull, the tender bobbed gently. "Promise, prison." A muffled thud echoed from the tunnel entrance they just fled. Then a wet, ragged cough, then another, closer. Dad didn't turn. His gaze stayed locked on Mark. "Go," he rasped, the tremor finally audible. "Lily needs you." Mark grabbed the rope ladder, the coarse hemp biting his palms. "Dad." The word choked him. Glass shattered high above as a porthole imploded, showering glittering shards into the dark water. Shadows moved at the tunnel mouth, shuffling, stumbling figures silhouetted against the faint tunnel light. Wet gasps filled the bay. Dad braced himself, feet planted wide on the dock edge, a silent, immovable wall. Heart tearing, Mark shoved Lily onto the ladder. "Down," he yelled, pushing Mom after her. He scrambled down behind them, landing hard in the tender's belly. He grabbed an oar, fumbling with the mooring rope. Above, Dad stood silhouetted against the moonlight, facing the advancing shadows. The first sickly figure lurched onto the dock. Dad roared, a raw, desperate sound echoing off the steel walls, and charged forward, tackling the shape back into the gloom. Mark hauled the rope free. The tender drifted away from the ship's side. He jammed the oar into the water, pulling hard. As they gained distance, Mark looked back. Dad was a dark, struggling shape on the edge of the dock, grappling with another silhouette. Then they vanished into the shadowed bay entrance. The only sounds were the splash of the oar, Lily's choked sobs against Mom's shoulder, and the fading, wet symphony of the dying ship. Behind them, silence swallowed the bay, out of the frying pan and into the fire, or so they say.
If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing to see more. Also, feel free to suggest future short stories in the comments. From the bottom of my heart, I hope you have a great day and thank you for your time.